Thanks for tuning in. You're listening to Gnostic Studies. And we'd like to continue our Gnostic Astrology series today. However, want to give you some relevant information before we forget, which is that the classes are going to have to change to Sunday nights going forward. Unfortunately, due to a schedule change on this end. So it's going to change to Sundays, same time. Or I guess depends on where you are, right? So 3 days from now. So we're going to have a meditation on that day, the next two classes or the next two Sundays. And then after that, we'll jump back into it and we'll do another, we'll be back with Aquarius and we'll keep going. The other thing is that the internet is up and down right now. It's plug-in internet, but sometimes it's not solid and they haven't figured out what the deal is. So if it cuts, I will do my best to wait for it to reconnect and restart the router and all that, but just wanted to let you know. All right. So we're continuing our studies with Capricorn, and we're going to review the previous class, which is the handout that's on your screen there. Capricorn 2 is the one we did last week. The zodiacal course from Samael and Weor. So he talked about how Capricorn is the house of Saturn. Saturn is the Ancient of Days. In Capricorn, we speak of the mind because Saturn is where the green hierarchies live, who gave us the mental body or animal soul. So that touches on something we're going to talk more about with today's material related with the soul, but we'll save it for that. But regarding the mind, he says the mind should liberate itself from all kinds of schools, religions, sects, beliefs, etc. All those cages are obstacles which render the mind incapable of thinking freely. There is a need to become free from the illusions of this world and to become the fine and marvelous instrument of the intimus or inner being. We have to free the mind from all kinds of desirous reasoning, right? The reasoning of desire. It's important to Christify the mind. We need the Christ mind, the mind that only thinks with the heart, that only listens to hunches, and that does not reason when the heart commands. The mind which does not react before external impacts is a Christ mind. The mind should convert itself into the instrument of the heart. What does reason know? Reason is a painful process of the mind based on the illusions of external things. Reason does nothing but divide the mind with the struggle of the antitheses, between thesis and antithesis. The decisions of reason are daughters of ignorance and always bring pain. In the age of Aquarius, the new humanity will be the humanity of intuition. The intuitive only acts with the voice of silence. The total Christification of the mind is only realized with the Kundalini of the solar mental body. which is the 4th degree of the power of fire. Through the Kundalini of the mental body, we extract the Christ mind from the animal soul. We must expel all kinds of earthly thoughts from the mind, from the mental temple. Reason is of the animal I, while intuition is the voice of the inner being. Reason is external, intuition is internal. The 4th degree of the power of fire converts us into an arhat. That's the title of that degree. When we have it, we have the degree of arhat. The mental body also has its medulla and its serpent. The ascent of the Kundalini of the mind is achieved with the merits of the heart. Ancient astrology and the authentic planetary order. Right, this is one of the things we mentioned in the previous class, that the days of the week have been modified by the Catholic Church, and that the original ordering of the days of the week was Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So Saturday is the last day of the week, according to this system, and it's the only one that is the same as our modern Saturday. All the others are slightly different. So we gave here a little table, because this is also related with what are called planetary hours, which are the hours to interact with the planets. And since the planets are ruled by angels, archangels, or divinities, devas, divas, genies, whatever you want to call them, then we want to know the corresponding day of the week to interact with them. So if we need to ask for help related with something that's ruled by the moon, such as, let's say, marriage, something like that, then we're going to work with the time of day that corresponds to the moon. If we need to work with something related with healing, with we're going to work with Mercury. Right? So we need to understand those correspondences, and that the advantage of knowing the correct days of the week, the esoteric day of the week, is that it allows us to work with the divinities properly. He says they knew that the ancient astrologers knew that the day was governed by 4 planets. That is, the day is divided into 4 parts like the cross within a perfect circle. And it worked with the ancient order, which is Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. Ancient alchemical ordering. The days of the week are the same. So you can divide the 12 hours of the day into 4 parts as well. And there's the second handout has a bunch of that graphics showing that stuff too. And then the final thing that was mentioned were the different exercises. One is to use egg powder, powdered eggshell, over the chest and armpits when you're going to bed. And then you pronounce Fa-Ra-On as you're falling asleep. Now, there's different ways of doing this, but I'll just say that if you have pants or pajama pants with elastic, and you have a t-shirt or whatever you're wearing underneath, if you put the powder on, and then as you're laying down, you put the powder on and then tuck the shirt in, then that'll minimize the amount of powder you're going to get all over the bed. Still going to have some, so keep that in mind. It's not dirty, it's just kind of gritty, kind of like little bit maybe like sand or something, depending on how fine the powder is. But it can be very interesting to do practices with that. So you can either dry the egg out yourself, or there's places where you can buy egg. Ideally, you would do it yourself. Second exercise, which is the exercise for the sign of Capricorn that Viracocha, Arnaldo Krumheller, also gives. We read him as the first Capricorn, which is related with stepping over an imaginary object placed on the floor. In this case, he says a coffin. So you start stepping over the step as if the object is about the height of your knees. Remember that Capricorn corresponds to the knees. So you step over and then put your foot down. So you step with the right foot over the imaginary object, up and over, and then you bring the left foot up and over. Then you step with the left foot first, left, up and over, and then right up and over. And between each one, you put the heels together, or feet together, however you want to put it. And then you can just go back and forth like that, left to right to left to right to left. And that's the exercise that's specific to working with the knees, the part of the body that corresponds to Capricorn, part of our organism. There's also the need to learn how to concentrate and meditate. And we have different handouts for that, as well as practices. And we're doing meditation in 3 days, as we mentioned. You're welcome to join us for that as well. And the final practice that's given is the same practice that we can do with any of the stars, constellations, or satellites, planetary bodies, whatever you want to call them, which is to ask our Father or inner being to transport himself to the temple, because each planetary body has a heart temple, and ask our Father or the inner being to transport themselves to the heart temple, and then request the principal genie of that temple to assist us in a particular way that corresponds to the part of the body or the attributes of the sign. So in this case with Capricorn, we can work with the power of the knees. Obviously, in a lot of traditions, there's praying on our knees, and that's another practice that we can do, is doing practices kneeling. So we refer you to that material if you want to learn more, the material from the previous class. Today, we want to jump into our material now. All right. So this is from the Esoteric Treatise of Hermetic Astrology. The monad, or inner being, and its Trinity. The being, the intimus, the monad, has two souls. The first is the spiritual soul. The second is the human soul. The first is Dante's Beatrice, the beautiful Helen, the Shulamite of the wise Solomon, the ineffable, adorable wife, the Buddhi of Theosophy. The second is the human soul, the causal principle, the noble husband, the superior Manas of Theosophy. Even when it may seem rare and strange, while the human soul works, the spiritual soul plays. Adam and Eve integrate within the monad. And its Kabbalistic value is 10, which reminds us of Io, I-O, That is to say, the vowels E, O. The very sacred union of the eternal masculine with the eternal feminine. The integration of the opposites within the essential and divine monad. Right? So the masculine soul, the feminine soul, they unite together in the monad. The divine triad, Atman, Buddhi, Manas, the being, we have said and we repeat, is not born, nor does it die, nor reincarnate in run-of-the-mill intellectual animals. We can and should affirm beyond all doubt that only a fraction of the human soul lives inside the lunar bodies. The latter is the essence, the psychic material, in order to elaborate or develop the human soul, and thereby the spiritual soul. So the essence is the psychic material in order to elaborate or create the soul. The monad, the being, creates, fabricates, and develops its two souls, and the latter should serve and obey him. We should distinguish between monads and souls. A monad, that is to say, a spirit, is. The spirit is. A soul one has. Or, in other words, a spirit is something that already is, whereas a soul is something that one has or one should obtain. One of the concepts that Gnosis presents to us is that we do not possess our souls, that we need to develop the soul. The soul doesn't yet exist. We have the seed of soul, the material to create soul, but we need to do that work, and that's part of our job of converting ourselves from a so-called intellectual animal into an authentic human being. Distinguish between the monad of a world and the soul of a world, between the monad of a person and the soul of a person, between the monad of an ant and the soul of an ant. Atoms, cells, bodies, and the work of the monads. The human organism in final synthesis is constituted by billions and trillions of infinitesimal monads. There are several types and orders of primary elements of all existence of every organism in the manner of germs or seeds of all the phenomenon of nature. We can call the latter monads, employing the term of Leibniz in the absence of a more descriptive term, in order to indicate the simplicity of the most simple existence. An atom, as a vehicle of action, corresponds to each of these germs, seeds, or monads. So each atom is ruled by a monad. The monads attract each other. They combine, transform themselves, giving form to every organism, world, microorganism, etc. Hierarchies exist among the monads. The inferior monads must obey the superior ones, that is, the law. Inferior monads belong to the superior ones. All the trillions of monads that animate the human organism have to obey the owner, the chief, the principal monad. The regulating monad, the primordial monad, permits the activity of all its subordinates inside the human organism until the time indicated by the law of karma. So, our organism is made up of atoms, and each one of those atoms is a monad, and each monad obeys its superior, and its superiors obey its superiors, and so on and so forth in a hierarchy. until they are obeying the monad we mentioned at the beginning, related with the principal, primordial, or regulating monad that rules our physical body. The regulating monad, the primordial monad, permits the activity of all its subordinates inside the human organism until the time indicated by the law of karma. When the billions or trillions of monads or vital germs abandon the physical body, death is the inevitable outcome. So, death is the result, according to this description, of the monads leaving the physical body. The monads in themselves are indestructible. They abandon their old connections in order to briefly carry out other new ones. The return to this world, the re-entry, re-embodiment, would be impossible without the work of the monads. They reconstruct new cells with their perceptions and sensations. They reconstruct new organisms. When the primordial monad is totally developed, it can afford to utilize its trillions of monads to create a world, a sun, a comet, and thus become a regulating monad of any star. But that is already something of God's. The monads or vital germs are not exclusive to the physical organism. Within the atoms of the internal bodies, there are found imprisoned many orders and categories of living monads. So we don't just have atoms of the physical body, we have them of the etheric, astral, mental, causal, etc. The existence of any physical or suprasensible, angelic or diabolical, solar or lunar body has billions and trillions of monads as the foundation. The lunar ego in itself is a composite of atoms of the secret enemy. Unfortunately, the monads or vital germs are prisoners within such monads. Within such atoms. Let me read it to you again. Unfortunately, the monads or vital germs are prisoners within such atoms. Now we will comprehend why occult science says the demon is the inverse of God. To each atom corresponds a vital germ or seed, a monad. All the infinite modifications, all the innumerable transformations are the result of the varied combinations of the monads. What happens when the physical body dies? Nature deposits in the three brains of the human being a certain capital of vital values. When they are exhausted, then death is inevitable. So we've talked about this before in the Gnostic psychology series. The three brains, so-called three brains of the human being, are related to the intellect, emotions, and action brain, sometimes called motor brain, but really it's three centers: motor, instinctive, and sexual. After the death of the physical body, the ego, garbed with its lunar bodies, continues in the molecular world. Three things go to the cemetery: the physical body, the vital body, and the personality. The vital body floats near the sepulchre and disintegrates as the physical body disintegrates, as its monads become liberated. The personality is inside the sepulchre, but it comes out when someone takes flowers, when a mourner visits it. It ambulates in the cemetery and returns to the sepulchre. The personality has a beginning and an end. It slowly disintegrates in the cemetery. So note what is said here, that the personality is not the essence, is not the material with which we fabricate our soul. The personality is something different. And generally speaking, the personality is somewhat like the mind that we mentioned before, something we need to make use of, but that we should not be a slave of. We should not let it make the decisions for us. Proserpine, the queen of the infernos, is also Hecate, the blessed goddess mother Death, under whose direction work the angels of death. Right? He's talking about death because death and birth are related to Saturn, the planet that is ruled by Capricorn. Mother Space, converted into Mother Death, dearly loves her children, and that is why she takes them away. The angels of death, when they are working, wear their funeral attire. They assume a spectral figure. They clutch the scythe, and with it cut the silver cord that connects the internal bodies to the physical body. The angels of death cut the cord of life and take the ego out of the physical body. The angels of death are very wise, and they develop and unfold under the ray of Saturn. The angels of death not only know what is related with the death of the physical body, these ministers of death are, moreover, profoundly wise in everything related with the death of the pluralized I, with the elimination of our psychic aggregates or egos, our desires. After the death of the body, the disembodied one falls into a fainting fit, which lasts 3.5 days. The Tibetan Book of the Dead says, "You have been in a faint during the last 3.5 days. As soon as you recover from this faint, you will have the thought, 'What has happened?' For in that moment, the entire All right, looks like we're back. Sorry about that. The Kabbalistic value of the ego is 56. This is the number of Typhon, the mind without spirituality. The ego carries away its worldliness beyond the sepulchre of the physical body, and the retrospective exercise of the life that just passed away is very terrible. Retrospective exercise means to look back in a reverse order on our life. After the great faint of 3.5 days, the deceased have to slowly relive in a retrospective manner the entire life that just passed. The concept of time is something very important in the work of the retrospective vision of the life that just passed, or retrospective vision of samsara. In the infernal worlds, all time scales are mineral, frighteningly slow, and oscillate between 80,000, 8,880 years. In this cellular region in which we live, gestation lasts 10 lunar months, infancy 100 lunar months, life more or less 1,000 lunar months. In the molecular world, events can be measured with the time scale that goes from 1 month to 40 minutes. In the electronic world, the time scale oscillates between 40 minutes and 2.5 seconds. The retrospective vision of samsara, the life that just passed, in the instant of death and during the subsequent 3.5 days, is of an electronic type. And that is why each event can be measured with the electronic time measurement. The retrospective vision of samsara in the molecular world is slower, and that is why each event is measured with the molecular time measurement. The essence, its monad, and a vacation in the superior worlds. The intimus, the monad, the being with its two souls, before we were born in this valley of tears, dwells in the Milky Way, and even during the life of the physical body, here below, it continues living in the stars. Right, the monad, the being, inner being, Atman, our inner guide, we could say, our spirit. The fundamental thing for the essence after death is to attain the relative Buddhic state and the intermediate liberation. This is only possible for the embryo of soul that we have within. The embryo of soul is the essence that we have within by climbing, ascending to the electronic world. It is urgent to know that our divine immortal triad, our being, our Buddha, lives in the electronic world. To unite with the immortal triad after death, to be one with it, in fact means to have become a relative Buddha, to have achieved intermediate liberation, and to enjoy a beautiful vacation before returning to a new human organism. If the clear primordial light has been properly recognized by the deceased at the supreme moment of death, then this is a clear sign that one has achieved intermediate liberation. If the deceased only perceives the secondary clear light at the supreme moment of death, then it is a sign that one will have to struggle much in order to reach the relative Buddhic state. The difficult thing for the essence is to become unbottled, to escape from its prison, to come out of the lunar bodies, to abandon the pluralized I. Each person's karma is definitive in this manner. When the deceased has relived the entire life that has just passed in a retrospective manner, they then have to appear before the tribunals of karma in order to be judged. The legend of Zoroaster says, everyone whose good deeds exceeds his sins by 3 grams goes to heaven. Everyone whose sin is greater goes to hell, while he in whom they are equal remains in the hamistikon until the future body or resurrection. Nowadays, in these times of perversity and cruel atheistic materialism, a portion of the disembodied join the submerged mineral kingdom, the infernal worlds, after the judgment. Also, many are the millions who enter a new womb in an immediate manner without having had a good vacation in the superior worlds. Certainly, the selection process exists in all of nature, and few are those who achieve intermediate liberation and the relative Buddhic state. The disembodied join eternity under the influences of the moon and exit eternity through the doors of the moon. We have already seen in the lesson of Cancer that the entire life of all persons is processed under the influences of the moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, while with life closing itself with a lunar finale, kind of wrapping back around. Really, the moon takes us and the moon brings us. And the 7 types of planetary vibrations in their indicated classical order and also repeat themselves after death, since as it is above, so it is below. Essences who, after having been judged, have the right to intermediate liberation and the relative Buddhic state, need a certain type of very special ecstasy and constant right effort in order to become unbottled, to escape from the lunar bodies and the ego. Fortunately, different groups of masters assist the disembodied and help them in this work with the rays of grace. In the same manner that republics, kingdoms, presidents, kings, governors, etc. exist in this cellular world in which we live, likewise in the molecular world, there are paradises, regions, and kingdoms where the essences enjoy indescribable states of happiness. The disembodied ones can enter kingdoms of paradisiacal happiness, such as that of dense concentration, the kingdom of the long hair, which is Vafrapani, or the unlimited vihara of the lotus radiation, Padmasambhava. The disembodied ones who march towards intermediate liberation should help themselves by concentrating the mind on any of the kingdoms of the molecular world. What happens between lifetimes and how a new organism is chosen? It is really very painful to wander from life to life, to roam through the horrible sewer of samsara without enjoying the Buddhic state and the intermediate liberation. There are kingdoms of inconceivable happiness that the disembodied one should make the effort to enter. Let us remember the blissful kingdom of the West, governed by the Amitabha Buddha. Let us remember Maitreya's kingdom, the heavens of Tushita, that kingdom of supreme bliss which the disembodied ones who are headed towards the electronic world can also enter. The disembodied ones should pray a lot to the Great Compassionate One and their divine triad, firm in their purposes, without allowing themselves to be deviated by anything, if they truly do not want to fall into a new womb without having enjoyed the intermediate Buddhic state in the world of free electrons. Happiness in the electronic regions, the intermediate liberation after having passed through the molecular paradises, is something that is impossible to describe with human words. The Buddhas travel through the inalterable infinite among the indescribable symphonies of the worlds, which throb within the bosom of Mother Space. However, every reward, every capital, becomes exhausted. When the Dharma of happiness is exhausted, the return to a new womb is inevitable. The essence loses the ecstasy attracted by the lunar ego, and, already bottled up once again inside the lunar bodies, returns to a new womb. The instant in which the essence loses the ecstasy is that in which it once again separates from its inner Buddha to remain bottled up in the lunar bodies and the pluralized I. The return to a new womb is carried out in accordance with the law of karma. The ego continues in the descendants of its past or past lives. The monads of its past physical body have the power of reuniting atoms, molecules, and of reconstructing cells and organs. In this manner, we return to this cellular world garbed with a new physical body. The poor intellectual animal begins their life in this world as a simple germinal cell, subject to the swift of time of the cells, and ends after about 80 years or more, loaded with memories and experiences of every kind. It is urgent to know that a certain selection also occurs in the process of re-entry or return. The I, the ego, is a sum of small I's or egos, and not all of those I's return to a new human organism. The I is a sum of different, diverse entities without an order of any type, and not all of these entities return to a new human organism. Many of those entities re-embody in bodies of horses, dogs, cats, pigs, etc. On a certain occasion, when Master Pythagoras was walking with a friend of his, the latter hit a dog. The master scolded him, saying, "Do not hit him, for in his painful bark I have recognized the voice of an old friend who died." It is clear that upon arriving at this part of our present chapter, the fanatics of the dogma of evolution will launch against us all their defamatory dribble and will protest, saying, "The ego cannot retrogress, everything evolves, everything should reach perfection," etc. Those fanatics ignore that the ego is a sum of small animal eyes, and that like attracts like. Those fanatics ignore that the ego does not have anything that is divine. It is a sum of animal entities that the law of evolution will never be able to take to perfection. The animal entities have the full right to enter animal wombs of dogs, horses, pigs, etc., and that cannot be prohibited by the fanatics of the dogma of evolution, even if they yell, curse, and fume. This is the doctrine of the metamorphosis or metapsychosis of Pythagoras, and is founded on the same laws of nature. In the Golden Ass of Apuleius, we find this doctrine of Pythagoras totally documented. Apuleius says that in the Thessaly of witchcraft, the rocks were nothing but petrified. Okay, looks like we're back again. This is an admirable symbolic way to represent the doubtless fact for every occultist that the different entities that constitute the pluralized I can become re-embodied in the organisms of beasts or enter the mineral kingdom, the vegetable kingdom, etc. With this reason, Christian mystics speak with love about the sister plant, the brother wolf, the sister rock. Rudolf Steiner, the German initiate, says that only man existed in the polar era, and that animals existed later. They were inside man. They were eliminated by man. Those animals were the different parts or entities of the pluralized I of the original men. Those entities were eliminated from their internal nature, and due to the protoplasmatic state of the earth at that epoch, it marched towards the present physical crystallization. Those polar and hyperborean men had the need to eliminate those animal entities, that pluralized I, in order to become true human beings, solar human beings. Some subjects are so animal-like that if all they have that is animal-like were to be removed from them, then nothing would remain. Saturn, Capricorn, and their esoteric attributes. Saturn is the planet of death and is exalted in Capricorn. This sign is symbolized by a small goat, as if to remind us of the goat skin of the intellectual animals, with the skin of a male goat, of the need to eliminate what we have that is animal-like within ourselves, the animal entities that we carry within. Or we could say the beast within, the beasts we have within that we need to eliminate. The stone of Capricorn is the black onyx. And every black stone in general. The metal is lead, and its day is Saturday. On Saturday, the witches of the Middle Ages celebrated their horrible witches' Sabbaths, but Saturday is the seventh day, which is also so sacred for the Jews. Saturn is life and death. The path of life is formed by the tracks of the hooves of the horse of death. The magnetic currents that ascend from the earth After passing through the sieves of the feet, continue along the calves, and then they arrive at the knees. They become charged with the lead of Saturn, thus acquiring solidity, form, strength. We're not talking about lead in its gross state. We're talking about the lead in a subtle colloidal state. The knees possess a marvelous substance which permits them free movement of such a simple and marvelous osseous machinery. Osseous is like a bone. That substance, with the famous synovial fluid or synovia, which comes from the root syn, meaning with, and ovia, meaning egg. Altogether, synovia means a substance with egg. The egg is very much utilized in jinn science, related with the fourth dimension, and we have already talked about this in the second edition of the Esoteric Treatise of Theurgy. The exercise of Capricorn. During the sign of Capricorn, imagine a coffin on the ground. Walk over that imaginary coffin, but imagine it in the middle of the legs when you walk. You will bend the knees as if to jump over the obstacle, as if to pass the legs over the coffin, but causing the knees to spin from right to left, with the mind concentrated on them, having the firm intention for them to become charged with the lead of Saturn. Master Masons will be able to understand this exercise of Saturn very well because they are the same steps of the Master Mason when entering the lodge. The natives of Capricorn have a disposition for pedagogia, which is teaching, the how to teach. They suffer a lot. They have a great sense of duty. They are practical by nature and always go through great suffering in their life. Someone betrays them. The women of Capricorn are magnificent wives, faithful until death, industrious, hard workers, patient to the maximum. But in spite of all those virtues, the husband often betrays them, abandons them, and even against their own will. Unfortunately, that is their karma. Some women of Capricorn get involved with other men, but this is only after already being abandoned by the husband and after having suffered frightfully. The men and women of Capricorn are quite egotistical, although not all of them. We're referring to the inferior type. Due to that egoism, they make many commitments and also garner enemies for themselves. The natives of Capricorn become very attached to things, to money, and some even become very avaricious or greedy. Capricorn is an earth sign, fixed, stable. However, the natives of Capricorn carry out many journeys, even if they are short. The emotional pain of Capricorns is terrible. They suffer too much. Fortunately, their practical sense of life saves them, and very soon they overcome the worst bitterness of life. So that's the end of the material we wanted to present to you today. We're going to open it up for questions and comments. At the bottom of the page, there's always the handout, the PDF, so that you can either physically print it or have it saved in case the internet doesn't work, and be able to use it, refer to it, if you want to know about summary, an attempted summary of the material that we covered, or the practice itself. Remember that the practice is just to step over an imaginary coffin on the ground in front of us. All right. Well, again, we want to invite you to Sunday, Same time, 3 days, we're going to be doing a meditation. The following Sunday will be the same thing, and then we'll jump into class on Sunday. So we'll be posting them shortly so that you're aware of them or reminded of them, whatever you want to say. But if there aren't any questions or comments, then we'll cut it there. We want to thank you for your time, that is, sharing your time and your attention with us. And we want to wish you the best in your internal work, in your esoteric work. And if you need to reach out, if you want to reach out, you can reach us at gnosticstudies@gmail.com. And we'd be happy to see what we can do to answer your questions. But again, in the meantime, we want to wish you the best in your esoteric work. Until next time.